Hi, welcome back. I've had some good feedback from last week's, and I deliberately tried to stay away from any of the kind of typical news content or even behind the news content. And it might seem like the topics are a bit random, but I think they come together nicely in the end. I tell a story at the end about an experience, or basically my experience with retail recently, or in the last even 12 months, 18 months, I've been noticing this. But I forgot to leave off the very last part, which is this kind of little bit of a shock I had maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago when I'm in a cafe and they're trying to tell me what the rules are, and I'm bending the rules a little bit. I'm sipping my coffee while I'm waiting for my turkey wrap to be made or whatever. But one of the young managers, I don't know, maybe she was like a senior barista, she just comply. She's like giving me an edict, just comply, like this. So that's why I wanted to talk about the hierarchy in these retail experiences now, and it's also to do with another word they've manipulated and taken a different ownership of, and they've changed the word customer to consumer. So customer used to be somebody you work for and you try to please and you try to delight, but consumer is a word that's like this annoying nuisance that just comes like a parasite and just consumes things, you know? So that's, I forgot to tie that little tiny anecdote in at the end, and I had a couple other corrections. The movie I was trying to remember is Will Smith, Pursuit of Happiness. Came to me later on in the talk. And then there were a couple of words, I had a couple of word slips. I used the word diverted when I meant to use the word averted, and I used the word descending when I meant to use the word dissenting. So I caught it immediately, but I wanted to just correct that. And then the final little piece is I talk a little bit about this defense that, you know, if there's a failure, it's usually competency, not conspiracy. And I always subscribe to that, but probably my biggest red pill was a health experience I had maybe 5 years ago, where I could see as clear as day that the failures were systemic and they were everywhere. They were in the Gulf, they were in Switzerland, they were in USA, they were in it's like specialist centers as well as main hospitals. They were just systemic everywhere. I could see just that the logic flows were wrong. And that's really one of my major red pills when I started asking the question, how is this medical system systemically corrupt? You know, I couldn't figure it out. Greed and incompetence and narcissism and egotism, none of that explained it. And so that's what led me to some of my biggest breakthroughs in terms of seeing the way things operate. And finally, I defined the word anarchy in there somewhere. No masters, no slaves is a literal kind of etymology. But another definition that I like is rules with no rulers, just as a clarification. All right, well, enjoy. Welcome back. All the links, again, will be in the YouTube, and they'll also be on the website under the podcast section, episode 5, synthesismeaning.me. Enjoy. Hey, welcome back. I've had some great feedback from my last blast, and I want to try and build on that. I'm personally, and I'm hearing from a lot of different quarters, everyone's kind of getting tired of the topic around the current mania, myself included, like the details behind it, even though you have to dig into it to get to your own perspective. But the whole topic is so tediously dull at this point. But what I'd like to focus on this one is these dialogues I've been having with some good friends that they're not even fence sitting. They really have checked out of the conversation. and trying to understand. These to me, these are real guys. These are, I mean, they're real men, modern men, but they just haven't integrated their warrior spirit with their Western lifestyle, I guess you could say. And so the sense I'm getting from the exchange is that they're kind of like, I don't want to look into this. If I look into this and I find something, then I'm going to have to change my view on this. Then I'm going to have to talk about it. Then I'm going to have to get an argument with everybody in my household and most of the people I know. And then I'm going to have to take action. You know, it's like this whole like, oh, I'm kind of enjoying my current Netflix series and the popcorn and so that's kind of the demeanor. It's not that there's anything not working. It's just, please don't make me look into this. That's kind of and getting to the bottom of some of these threads is like it is hard work. You actually have to go out. I forget that Buddhist expression. You have to go after truth like you want it more than oxygen, almost. However, to figure out that the mainstream story is flawed, it takes almost nothing. It just takes a couple of searches on a reliable search engine, and it's like scratching the thinnest veneer of paint with your fingernail. It's so easy to see. So any piece of the mainstream story that doesn't sit well with you, it's a 10-minute exercise to sit at your laptop or your PC and do a couple of searches on a clean search engine, and have your own little piece of the puzzle that you can see right through. Getting to what the real answer is, like I think they've done surveys in the U.S. I forget what the number is. It's a very big number. It's over 50%. I believe it's over 50% of Americans now don't believe the official story of 9/11. Or it might be even more damning that more than 50% of Americans believe that 9/11 was an inside job. So, I mean, that just shows you that people are very aware that the mainstream can't be trusted, that the governments can't be trusted. But then when you go to like all of the details behind that, you'll never get agreement in any pocket. So you're kind of getting this lazy consensus if you just listen to CNN. But if you just start looking, you'll just so quickly realize that there's so many holes in the story, just like the JFK story. It's just so obvious. It's almost a form of mockery, I think, how they make it so obvious that it's fake, because they're betting on your laziness. So I guess what I'd like to say is that what's missing is there's an imagination deficit, and I don't know. I guess most people have kind of outsourced their imagination to Hollywood, and they're quite happy with letting the imagination happen in the movies and TV series. And they've stopped imagining what the world could be like if we were all cooperating like a native people or First Nations type of traditional community, and they're quite happy to fantasize about superheroes and Star Wars and all the rest. And so there's just no moral will behind an inspired imagination that's happening. And so they just can't imagine anything better than comfortably being provided with a house in the suburbs that's completely isolated from any sense of community or spirituality, and an unlimited PornHub and an unlimited Netflix membership, and that's kind of their idea of, okay, I guess this is this life, So I don't know how you tap into that imagination other than recognizing. But I guess what I'd like to try and do in this blast is get people annoyed at the games that are being played and how they've kind of gotten into this position. It's a sophisticated level of mind fuckery, I would call it. I think this is going to be the title.
And it starts long before you're born. You know, your parents and grandparents were traumatized by world wars that were manipulated, and then they were also programmed. I mean, the generation that gave birth to us, they were the first ones being exposed to movies and TV in a big way, and that was major manipulation there. And so all your teachers, all your coaches, everybody that you looked up to, parents, uncles, and aunts, they all had the similar programming before you even showed up. And then it just went into hyperdrive. When I think about this concept of must-see TV, when I was really in some formative adult years, I guess you would say, probably 25 to 35 or maybe 22 to 32, something like that. And I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And that's just pure propaganda, psychological programming, trying to make you think that the ultimate life is complete stasis, just creature comforts. And so I'm constantly kind of stumbling on these programs that have been embedded in me, and they often have come from that time of must-see TV. But then, you know, at the same time, if somebody comes along that's sort of churchy and says, "Oh, that's Sam Malone on Cheers. He's just, that's just bad." You know, it's really easy to reject that. So, because it just sounds so dated and repressive, especially when it's so humorous and seemingly intelligent. You know, the humor was it seemed intelligent. So anyway, there's a massive, I guess what I'm trying to say is, and I've been watching, I'm just completely hooked on battle movies since Christmas, since before this latest mania swept the world. And it's just so clear to me that the battle is on. I mean, the Nazi tanks are rolling into the minds and hearts of the population right now through the mainstream media, and trying to fight it with Facebook threads is like, you know, they've got a howitzer and you've got barely a revolver. So so I think it's helpful to see that the tanks are rolling into the heads of your children through the government education and through the TV programming. And the battleground is the words that they're using and the spaces they're filling, to connect you back to that last episode, podcast 4. So they'll plant a word in your mind. Here's a perfect example. And this is like a coming of age movie for my entire generation. Breakfast Club. We all loved it. It was a high school, and there was a little bit of, you know, sexual content. It was like these kind of rebellious kids, and they're rebelling against authority. And so, but that's the first time I ever heard the word anarchy, when Judd Nelson had a line about it'll be anarchy, it'll be chaos, you know, something like that. And so boom, there, I'm at that time probably 18 or something. And now the word anarchy is in my brain as bedlam and chaos. It's a bad word. It's something you don't want. And so I mean the landscape is just riddled with and if you're not aware that this is like foreign agents largely that are manipulating your mindset, and they're marginalizing you through all these different manipulations, and they're marginalizing you into isolation of like what feels like impotence in the suburbs. And so then you just don't want to take up a torch and fight any battles, because your imagination's just been shot and you've sort of been bought off by creature comforts. And you also are owned by banks and mortgage companies and car loan financing companies and all of that, and corporations that we work for. So I think once you start seeing the fingerprints of the manipulation, and the mockery right in your face, I think that's enough to start getting you pissed off enough to want to dig into it yourself and make a case for for the greater good. Because the track we're on right now with these sleeping kind of fence sitters, they're not even fence sitters. They've taken a side, and the side is do nothing. The track we're on right now is, I mean, whether they do it on this wave or the next wave, it's coming with very little resistance. I mean, I can't believe I'm sharing clips online with mothers that are protesting for free speech and free movement, and they're being separated from their children on camera in Australia, and there's people on my Facebook defending the police. Oh, that she should have known the rules. Oh, the rules are completely against everything all our communities or our societies have always stood for. So now the other, so in terms of imagination, I mean, talking about it traditionally, it sounds like you're going backwards, but I don't know. I mean, obviously, it's a long way from here to there. But when you start to see the pieces of the like urban planning and the architecture, the way they've atomized us, and we move to another city, and then we're weakened by that, and we're all not involved with any kind of moral spirituality. We maybe be doing yoga or meditation at home, but there's no kind of moral fabric anymore. And so we're completely weakened. So to try and imagine what we would fight for, it starts to become difficult, except for, when they start coming to your houses and dragging away your neighbor because they posted something on Facebook. But that's almost going to be too late. So anyway, there is an image that keeps coming with Avatar type movies where you've got an advanced society that lives with more spirituality and virtue at the center, and one with the earth, And I'm not saying getting away from technology exactly, but I'm just saying rising above it. But anyway, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but there's a lot better ways to live than we are, and all you have to do is look at the history of the interference with these traditional societies. I mean, all over the world, traditional societies threaten the controllers, so they've done all kinds of dirty tricks to break them up. But I'll just go through some of the arguments that some of these guys are posing, guys and women are posing, and maybe we can try and dismantle them a little bit and get a dialogue happening around that. So I've been sharing this flyer from Vigilante. I'll share it in the link. I think it's a really good first step to try and help people. Like, there's all kinds of people that know it doesn't add up, but they don't have anything to grab onto. So Dollar Vigilante has put together a nice bullet point flyer of all the flaws in the story of the pandemonium. And so I've been sharing it with friends that I trust, and like one of my good old friends yesterday said, well, that's an interesting perspective. So the first argument I'm hearing the most, if you can get somebody's attention enough to try and get into a debate with you, the very first argument is, yeah, well, it's almost like this religious perspective. That guy, he believes CBC word for word, and you believe your channel's word for word. So I'm sure the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I'm not going to, I'm not going to pick a side. I'm just going to watch you guys make fools of yourselves. And I'll just watch how this plays out. It's like a total spectator thing. Well, the best seeds, these are just seeds of doubt I've been trying to plant with people. The best seeds I've gotten my hands on are, you got to notice by now that the mainstream changes their story every single day, and there's no part of their story that's coherent with any other part of their story. Okay? So it's like multiple levels of complete house of cards, bunch of fake numbers and KPIs, manipulations all over the world. And once you find the right truth channels, that especially the ones that saw it coming ahead of time, they've never changed their story. They're perfectly consistent, and their explanations are perfectly consistent on all levels of analysis. So it's not like, one's Catholic and one's Muslim and you're both just going on blind faith. It's not that at all. One story hangs together, and the other story doesn't even hang together on its face in any given day. So I think you can kind of plant some seeds of doubt around that. But yes. So what's some of the other arguments that are being put forward? Well, one is just people just don't want the discomfort of going sideways with authority. So we've been so conditioned through our education system, through our corporate jobs, through our family systems often, that, you're a naughty child if you go against the authority. But there's no other cross-check. There's no like, how does the authority line up with my idea of what's right for the population? There's no cross-check. There's just like trust authority blindly. It's like this priest, the modern priest idea. If the scientist in the white coat says it, then that's the authority, and you go along with it. So that's another level of discomfort. People want to be seen as good little boys and girls still, and they also think, this is another thing I've noticed. I said this in one of our earlier podcasts, but there's this lack. I mean, most of us in our 40s and 50s now, and there's this idea that the people that run the world are some other group of people. Oh no, the grown-ups are going to do that. Like, we're not the ones that are owning our own future and our children's future, So it's like realizing that we are the grown-ups, and when authority goes against what is in our best interest long term, that's when it's time to speak up, and it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is. And so this whole trust authority, it's combined with distrusting your own reason and judgment. And I wish I knew better how that's happened, but I just can't believe people with their own eyes won't say, okay, my eyes said this, my brain says this. Now, if I put that together into words, it looks like this. People aren't doing that. They're just taking the messages straight, and there's no cross-check with what they're witnessing in real life. So I think, okay, yeah, this brings me to another aspect that I saw right from the beginning. And I thought it was so strange. But I did see this pattern, maybe it was a year or two ago, that people are confusing what they see on TV and what they've seen in movies with reality. It's like watching Saving Private Ryan. I watched Saving Private Ryan last night, and people think that they have studied the history of the Second World War. You know what I mean? And they can talk about the Second World War. Maybe there were some truths in there, but you're getting confused. So when Nelson Mandela died, Morgan Freeman got a whole bunch of RIP condolence messages on his Facebook page because they got confused between the actor and the real life leader, because they've seen Morgan Freeman play Nelson Mandela a couple times in movies, for example. There was another one like that, if I can remember. Oh yeah, so there was a Facebook quote, or a LinkedIn quote. There's these guys that put, and often very inspiring quotes, and it was a great quote. But it was Will Smith's picture on a quotation of his character from, the one where he's stuck, where he's down and out with his son, and he becomes a traitor. Oh, sorry, I can't remember the title right now. But anyway. So the movie was inspired by a book, which is inspired by a real life guy, okay? That Will Smith is playing that character. And so from the book to the script, there's a character he's playing, in which the original. So you can either put credit to the script writer, or you put credit to the original author of the book, or you put credit to the original guy that he's playing. Those three people you could credit the source of the quote. But it's not Will Smith. He's reading it, right? So the guy had put this beautiful photo and this beautiful quote about being down on your luck and always battling to better yourself, that kind of a thing. And then they credit it to Will Smith. I was like, wow, that's so bizarre. And there's all kinds of people liking. Nobody's pointing it out that you're misquoting. Like Will Smith read that. He read that on screen. Will Smith didn't say that. He's an actor. He's reading a script. So people are getting very confused with the movie they saw and what's happening. So when CNN or whoever starts to sound similar to a movie that they saw before, they're just confusing them all and putting it all together. And so when you watch some of those Contagion movies, I mean, you're kind of traumatized, or whatever you imagine yourself, the role you imagine yourself playing when you watch that movie, that kind of gets into your DNA. Then you see CNN playing it out, and now you think you're kind of playing in a movie, and it's weird. It's weird if you're not seeing the disconnect between the two. So, yeah, people, and so on top of that, so that's why people start to distrust their own eyes and their own reasons. They somehow, and I have found this really weird for at least, more than 10 years. You're at some amazing event, like I was at my friend's bachelor party. It wasn't really bachelor, it was just a stag night. We just went out, it was very wholesome, but we ended up at not even a nightclub, it was just like a roadhouse. And these guys are filming. Instead of enjoying, we all have bonded now through this experience. Instead of enjoying the evening, we got these guys wandering around filming filming other people enjoying the evening. It's like, this is so weird. You're witnessing your life like a completely partial observer. So when you see the woman in Sydney getting her child taken from her from the police, all these people are, having an instinct of filming. That's one thing, but I mean that should be secondary to like protect the mother, protect the child, right? Like you're just watching the world unfold in front of you, and for some reason you think you're watching simulacra, something artificial. And I don't know exactly how that has happened in our psyche, but it's really creepy. It's really, really creepy that something terrible can happen to somebody innocent right in front of you, and your first instinct is to try and get points on social networks instead of trying to help the tragedy get diverted, right? So that's just another aspect of confusing reality with film. Okay, so that. I wish I could kind of remember a couple of these other arguments with these guys, because I've seen a couple of people during this pandemonium go from, these impartial observers to actually sort of getting almost activist, but they're quietly doing, and they send me private messages. Nobody's saying anything on LinkedIn. I mean, the entire professional network, they're just a bunch of posers. Nobody's saying anything that this doesn't add up. All these great critical thinkers that are patting themselves on the back for their great intellect all the time. Nobody's speaking out. Nobody's broadcasting anything. And so I posted, there was a guy, he wrote a nice feel-good kind of post about things you've learned. And there's all kinds of nice, positive, spiritual, what would you call it? Spiritual uplifting experiences during this time about valuing what's important, valuing family, valuing time together, valuing peace, getting out of the rat race. There's all these good things. But I posted on there, live free or die. That's something I've learned, the value of freedom. The freedom's worth dying for. And no, not one comment, feedback, nothing. It's just nobody wants to go there. So I think what's happened, let me try and tie these threads together. Imagination, okay, the imagination that somehow we've outsourced. People's greatest idea of imagination is just unlimited PornHub and Netflix in my comfortable suburban house, and maybe my kids can go off to their government programming schools, and that's it. So freedom, they think they are having freedom right now. They feel this is free enough. I mean, so what if that everything's getting censored and it's sort of a bit of a hoax? I'm comfortable right now, So I just urge you to think that the tanks are rolling into the minds of your own households. And if you don't start getting your own position it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late. The mindsets are going to get polluted. If the kids ever go back to school, oh my God, I don't know how you can hold this descending viewpoint at the moment. It's so reassuring. There's all kinds of, especially in Berlin, all kinds of populations that are rising up and demonstrating that they're going to take their freedoms back. But man, it's that population that's quietly observing. That's the one that's really dangerous, because when they fake the next thing, some bigger pandemic, and that whole group stays quiet and they bring out bigger measures and bigger restrictions and house arrests and all these other things, that'll just go again, because you've got like this 80-90% silent majority just watching the whole thing like it's a Netflix series. It's really scary and sad. Okay, so let me just share a couple other kind of points. I think just in terms of, well, Sam Harris has a book called The Moral Landscape, which I have not read, but I just liked the image that he painted when he kind of explained the positioning of the book one time. And it's like a topographical map, thinking of the world in a topographical map of morality. And that's not bad. And Mark Passio teaches that morality and freedom are one and the same. You can't have freedom without morality, and so you can't have morality without like a hierarchy of what you think is most important in your community. Anyway, I think personally, when you're thinking about the world now, I think what's really, really useful is a topographical map of mindfuckery. Which populations are most in the dark in terms of trusting their government and trusting their TV programming? And I would score Canada extremely dark on that topographical map. I think it would be so useful. Some of the kind of more inspiring ones, Sweden keeps getting paraded as an inspiring one. I'm really not sure. I know they've had a rough ride lately, and I know they've ignored a lot of these ridiculous measures, and their numbers on TV, there's a whole game going on behind the numbers on TV, but are showing the same as everybody else's. So they ignored the measures because somehow their health system is separate from their government. They ignored the measures, and their performance in terms of the contagion is the same as everyone else's. So that's nice. That gets paraded as it, but there's so many games going on with that I'm sure that's going to be used as an example somehow. Anyhow, some of the countries I have heard in this moral landscape of lack of mindfuckery. Mexico is a great one, keeps coming up. Nicaragua, I heard, was a good one. Colombia, I'm going to guess, because they're lawless and they're vigilante. I mean, they've got that vigilante spirit. And then Peru was another one I heard early on. I'm not sure if that's still valid. But a healthy level of lawlessness and distrust in authority and self-governance, combined with moral living, however you want to define that, which is generally in like smaller communities that are rural. That's where you're going to find like moral living. If you combine all of that, you're going to find a very attractive place to be during this one and whatever's coming next. Okay, so let me try and tie in this other idea of here's another word. Okay, so I explained how anarchy has been robbed. So anarchy just means no masters, no slaves. There's nothing scary about anarchy. But if you ask anybody, they think anarchy is bedlam and chaos and scary. And it's been associated with some of those crazy movies where you have like one night with no rules, so that's when people picture that they've been traumatized by the word anarchy. But here's another one, apprentice. It's no accident that the current clown boots in office in the US was on a major hit reality show. I don't know, was it 10 years, called The Apprentice? They completely denigrated that word. And the idea of apprenticeship is now, they think apprenticeship is fake it till you make it. It's a snake term where you're supposed to be outmaneuvering your peers. So all professional conduct and ethics goes right out the window. Um, and that's this loss of apprenticeship and this complete abandonment of professional codes of conduct makes everybody completely manipulatable. Oh, this is the other argument. Good. This is taking me back to the original. And I used to subscribe to this, before some of these big pennies dropped. But people will often say, if I have to consider competency versus conspiracy, I'll consider the failure is always going to be competency related. Okay, and that used to sound good to me. But now you got more than 50% of the U.S. population that knows that 9/11 was an inside job. So, and not only that, oh my God, this is just, I got to tie these dots together. But okay, this concept of gaslighting. Okay, gaslighting is when you're actually in the right and the person tries to make you feel terrible about it. Okay, so you say, it really looks like the shepherd and the sheepdog are working together. It really looks that way. Now, tinfoil hat, conspiracy theorist, blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, mainstream TV that everybody loves to trust like it's the new religion, they've been talking about nothing but conspiracies for the last, 24 months or something? All of these crazy gate conspiracies. Everybody's fine with that. But then if somebody outside of that narrative says it really looks like the governments and the media are working together and the governments across the world are somehow working together, oh, you're crazy. That's when the gaslighting starts. So, to dispute that, I find it useful to separate conspiracy fact from conspiracy theory. There's a long history of conspiracy fact, false flags. Every major battle, every major trauma in the world has been a self-sabotaging false flag. So there's reams and reams and reams. History is a conspiracy history. And yeah, the theory comes in, like I said, when you're trying to tie the threads of what exactly happened with World Trade Center 7 or whatever it is, or what happened with the passengers. That's where the speculation comes in. So the mainstream has one cohesive story, even if it doesn't make any sense. They're all saying the same story. And so then the theories come in when you're trying to explain these little threads, and then they're weakened because if you just accuse them, oh, you guys don't have the story lining up. Well, we didn't make it up. That's why. So anyway, this thing between competency and conspiracy, I know what they're saying, but you just have to pay attention, I guess, to the machinations. I guess is what I would say. And then the other argument is, get 5 people together, try and organize a one-car parade. You can't get them to agree. So how, in God's name, could you possibly get governments all over the world and media organizations all over the world? That's a great argument too. That's a really, really good argument. And the reason is, but then you think about if you're working on a really, really large corporation, like a lot of us have had a chance to do that, especially if it's extremely hierarchical and extremely authoritative and controlled from the hierarchy. It's really, really easy to get everybody to do what the CEO says, right? If there's one email goes out and the CEO says this is our top priority this month, nobody's gonna second guess that. So you're just not seeing the hierarchy behind the coordination. You're assuming these are independent agents in different parts of the world that aren't cooperating under one leader. But if they're terrified, if they're in a network that they're terrified of, they're going to fall into line, and it's going to look extremely coordinated, and it's going to be easy to spot, as a lot of people have pointed out online. Okay? So yes, this idea of apprenticing is a waste of time, for one thing, and professional ethics is for pussies, okay? These are kind of the atmosphere nowadays, and I have no idea how to get back out of that. But that's just a recipe to get all kinds of obedient dogs in the organization just to do what the hierarchy says. if you abandon your ethics and your professional codes. Okay, the mockery. Wow, I don't know if I can get into all of that. The almost everything that's done in the mainstream in terms of conspiracy coordination is done with mockery as well. So they're not happy if they pull it off. They want to ridicule the people watching at the very same time. And so it's just like an extra dance on the grave of the guys that are in the suburbs watching it all go down. Okay? So maybe one example is the checkerboard pattern, which is a Masonic symbol, and it represents base consciousness. It represents somebody that's wandering through life and they don't know the difference between right and wrong. They don't know the difference between truth and falsity. They're just bumbling through the checkerboard. Well, that's bad enough, but pay attention to the taxis and the police hats. They're all completely decorated with checkerboards, right? They're saying these people have no idea what they're an agent of, essentially. They're just bumbling fools bumbling through life. They don't know right from wrong. They don't know up from down. So that's just an example. The other one is they will like parade a really sexy actress from Hollywood, and then later turns out that that's actually a transvestite. You know, that one's constantly happening. It's an extra level of mockery. So not only do you not know what's happening and that the roles that they're playing are manipulating you, but we're going to make this person that you adore is actually a man underneath. And that's going to be this extra level of mockery. Okay? And this other thing, this other aspect that has been completely removed from our culture is the idea of righteous anger. Okay, is knowing, and so you have to have your bearings right. Wait a second, I have every right to be extremely pissed off, and I'm going to stand up for this right now. You have to know right from wrong to be able to do that. But there's a program, and it's rampant in Europe, but it's rampant in the younger generations now too. That you know, and it's come through the new age. That if you get angry about anything, you're wrong. The guy that's angry, the guy or woman who's expressing outrage, they must be wrong. They haven't risen above it. So there's a difference between like petty anger and immature anger when you're just getting like your ego's been hurt and you're angry. You know, that's not something, and that so the people aren't separating righteous anger. Well, you've got a really, really good reason to be really, really pissed off and to march and speak out and share facts and confront people on the injustice. And petty anger, which is just this, you know, narcissistic, petty, ego level anger. They've conflated those two in the cultural programming. And so I've got a number of personal experiences where I have really good reason to stand my ground, and the people around me are so quick to convince you, no, there's nothing to be annoyed about here. You know, I'm not talking about politics right now. I'm just talking about things that are happening in life. They're so programmed that anger, and I think it's partly that the masculine energy is being neutered in the home, or they're actually being run out of the home. People aren't used to healthy, righteous, stern anger, drawing boundaries when they're supposed to, and so as soon as there's annoyance rising up, they assume the person being annoyed is wrong. There's no investigation. You're just wrong, and their mind. I don't know where this expression comes from, but Pursuit of Happiness is the Will Smith movie I was trying to think of. But this expression where your mind is just a chimpanzee on LSD. Like if you're running your life from your mind, you can be just so manipulated, and you can come up with any rationalization for anything, anytime. So when somebody's trying to talk you out of being angry for the right reasons, that's the chimpanzee on LSD. It kicks into emotion, and they'll rationalize anything. And in the moment you start to question yourself, wait, am I being unreasonable? Then later you think, wait a second, that was just pure rationalization to diffuse a good case for protecting boundaries or whatever your rights are. And so keep an eye for that. People, there's a whole population, there's a whole generation of people that think that all anger is wrong. And so that's another thing. Like, I think these guys that are in the suburbs in their comfort and they're just watching it all go by, they know if they get connected to that righteous anger, they know that they'll go all the way with it. And they're just like, oh, I don't know if I want to get into this. It's going to disrupt my worldview. Now, there was one last topic. Oh yes, I gotta wrap up with this. I know this is a little all over the shop, but I hope it's coming together in terms of the atmosphere we're operating in. So I guess in summary, you need to tap into that righteous anger, and part of that is going to come from the awareness that not only are you being unbelievably manipulated, and you have been your entire life, but they're not happy with just manipulating you. They're mocking you at the very same time. Okay? So once you tune into those aspects, you can tap into your righteous anger, and you can get motivated to look into some of these things and start speaking out about some of these things. This is just this thing, and I think it's just an example. It's an example of how controlled people are and how the atmosphere in businesses is changing. And now this is like only, I'm talking about just interfacing with service organizations, restaurants and bars and cafes, because that's my experience outside of my own corporate life. But what's been happening, it just seems to me it happened overnight, because all of a sudden I see it. But it must have been happening slowly over the last 10 years. What's been happening is, like, historically, what's the situation historically? If you're trying to run a bar or a restaurant, what do you want? You want a professional manager that you trust, and then you want a bunch of staff that are motivated to be in line with whatever the strategy is of that offering. And then within that, in a, in a principled way, you want to, like, delight your customers all day and every day. You want your regulars coming back. You want them bringing family and friends all the time. You put the customers on top of everything. Once you're within that realm of this is the strategy and positioning of this organization. Well, what's been happening is, and this is all these pieces come together with this example. They have convinced people that their masters are not the customers. Their masters are their managers, and then the managers have corporate bosses, right? So it's all about the money flow and the accounting. And so to do that, they have to socialize the tips. They socialize the tips. So you've got these great professional baristas and servers that could, like, make it an incredible experience. But their loyalties are actually to their managers, because the managers are the ones handing out the shifts, and they're also the ones, like, figuring out who gets the next promotion and everything else. So as a customer, you go in there and you just playing like I didn't notice when I became a second-class citizen. I'm a customer. I'm walking into a business enterprise. I think I'm number one, as long as I'm conducting myself within the conduct of a good guest. That's not the case anymore. You're kind of a nuisance now, because everybody that's in that service organization is thinking about impressing their boss and sucking up to the boss. So what happened, and the boss is kind of threatened by this outside energy. So they deal with you, they take your money, but they look at you as if you're beneath them, because you're not in their hierarchy. So the hierarchy is flipped upside down, where the manager of the enterprise is on top, and then probably his financial bosses, CFO of the franchise, or whoever's behind the scenes, is above him, and he's got the corporate track. And the servers are just trying to tippy-toe around that guy's pride and ego and control issues. And so the customers become this kind of necessary nuisance. And the side effect of this, and this is just everywhere, I can't believe it. It's in the Gulf, and it's all over a developing world as well. I'm starting to experience it. I don't understand this either. This is some kind of millennial thing. But the manager, even if they're off duty, they're sitting in the restaurant with their laptop. Because inside that restaurant, they feel like they're always the boss or whatever. And so when you go in as a customer, there's always a manager. Like, I can't tell you how often this is happening. There's some manager, 2 or 3 or 4 managers somewhere in a corner with their laptops, counting their beans, feeling like they're working. And what happens on top of that? Well, the servers are serving them first. So when you come in as a server, you're like, it's sort of like you're walking into someone else's office space, and you're just this annoying nuisance. And you're kind of thinking, when did this happen? Like, isn't my money the money that's actually making this place work? And they've just lost sight of all that because their loyalties are completely to the hierarchy. It's really, really weird to me, and but it's so unbelievably common. So I guess, and it just shows you how controlled the thing is. It's a complete top-down control in all of this. The whole theme of this blast is that somehow through the cultural conditioning and a bunch of other sort of corruptions, I guess I would say, top-down control has been established. So if some government agency says something to the top people in the franchise, and then they send it out to the branches, they just do it. They just do it. They don't care if it means their branch is going to be out of business in the next 4 weeks or what have you. Okay, so that's that's a bit of a blast, but I hope it kind of connects some dots and how these pieces are coming together. And what I'm really wanting to do is give you some ammunition to motivate your fence-sitting friends to get really pissed off about the manipulation they're a part of, and they're just watching it happen, and tap into their righteous anger. I hope that helps, and to bring it all together. Anyway, thanks for listening. I enjoyed getting it off my chest, and we'll connect again next week. Take care. Well, I'm glad we reconnected. Let's get the community rallied. You can join us at the website, synthesismeaning.me. The podcast history is there in the podcast section. We have a mail list. We have a Facebook group. All the information is there around connecting. And I will get back to you next week with follow-up, following my heart and truth. So thanks for joining us. Nice to be together again in this post-apocalypse radio station. Take care.
yourself.